All right, let's dive into one of my favorite design patterns, one that's just incredibly elegant. It's called the Decorator. This thing is a total game changer for adding new functionality to your code, giving you a kind of flexibility that can seriously level up how you build your apps. So let's get right into it.
You've been there, I've been there, we've all been there. You've got this perfectly good working piece of code, but now you need to add a new feature, or maybe 5 new features. And that first, obvious solution, it almost always leads you down a path that ends in a tangled, unmaintainable mess. So the big question is, how do you extend what an object can do without blowing up your existing code? Well, that's exactly the problem we're going to solve today.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with a really simple, relatable problem I'm calling the coffee shop problem. We'll see why the most common approach, subclassing, just completely falls on its face. Then we'll uncover a much more flexible way to do things, get into the nitty-gritty of how to actually decorate your objects, and finally, we'll talk about when and why you should be using this pattern in your own work. Okay, let's ground all this theory in something we can all picture. Imagine you're building an ordering system for a coffee shop. Sounds easy enough, right? But as you're about to see, even a simple menu can get real complicated real fast. So the job is to model a customer's order. They pick a base drink, an espresso, a latte, whatever, and then they can start adding things to it. Milk, sugar, you name it. And of course, every single extra they add changes the final price and the description of the drink. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Now, if you're coming from a traditional object-oriented background, your brain probably screams one thing: inheritance. And that right there is the trap. It seems like the right move, but it's going to lead us straight into a mess. So the obvious solution is to just make a new class for every single possible combination. You'd have your base espresso class, right? Then you make an espresso with milk class that inherits from it. Need a latte with sugar? That's a new class. An espresso with both milk and sugar? You guessed it, another new class. You can probably already see the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. And this is where it all falls apart. First, you get what we call a class explosion. I mean, with just a handful of drinks and a few add-ons, you're suddenly managing dozens or even hundreds of classes. It's insane. Second, it's completely rigid. What if a customer wants double milk? Your class structure can't handle that on the fly. And finally, oh my gosh, the maintenance. You want to add caramel syrup? You have to go create a latte with caramel, an espresso with caramel, an espresso with milk and caramel. It is an absolute nightmare. Clearly, that approach is a dead end. We need a better way. We need a way to add features to objects dynamically without creating this brittle, explosive class structure. And that is where the decorator pattern makes its grand entrance. The whole secret, the big mindset shift, is this core design principle. You have to favor composition over inheritance. So instead of thinking in terms of is a, like an espresso with milk is a kind of espresso, we start thinking in terms of has a. We build bigger things by composing them out of smaller, interchangeable parts. And that brings us to what the decorator pattern actually is. Think of it like this. It's a pattern that lets you add new behaviors to objects by wrapping them in other objects. I love the analogy of Russian nesting dolls. You start with your core object, and you just pop it inside a wrapper that adds a little extra functionality. And then you can take that whole thing and pop it inside another wrapper, and so on and so on. Okay, theory is great, but let's get our hands dirty. Let's see how this actually solves our coffee shop problem in code, and we'll do it the clean, super flexible way this time. The structure really just has four main parts. First, you need a base interface or abstract class. That's our component. For us, it's a beverage. Then you have your concrete components. These are the actual simple objects you want to add stuff to, like espresso or latte. The magic really begins with the abstract decorator, which also acts like a beverage, but secretly holds a reference to another beverage. And finally, you have your concrete decorators, like milk and sugar, for every feature you want to be able to add. So let's watch it happen. A customer places an order. We start by creating a plain, simple espresso object. At this point, that's all it is. It's a beverage that costs $1.99, and its description is just espresso. Nothing fancy, yet. And here is the magic. The customer wants milk. So what do? We don't change the espresso object at all. Instead, we create a new milk object, and we pass our existing beverage into it. The milk object now literally wraps the espresso. So when you ask this new object for its cost, the milk wrapper just asks the espresso inside it, "Hey, what's your cost?" It gets the answer and then just adds its own 50 cents on top. It's so elegant.
And the best part is you can just keep going. They want sugar too? No problem. We take our current object, which is now a milk-wrapped espresso, and we wrap that whole thing inside a brand new sugar object. Each layer just adds its own little bit of cost and its own little bit to the description by talking to the layer beneath it. It's just unbelievably dynamic.
I mean, this slide just says it all, doesn't it? Before, with inheritance, we were stuck with these rigid, predefined classes for every combination. Now, with the decorator, we have these flexible, composable objects. We went from one class per combination to one small, simple class per feature. It's just so much cleaner and way more scalable. All right, we've seen how it works under the hood, so let's zoom out a little and really lock in the key benefits and the exact situations where you should be reaching for the decorator pattern. So, to sum up the big wins, you get this amazing flexibility to add and combine behaviors at runtime. You totally dodge that class explosion nightmare we saw with inheritance, and your code becomes so much more extensible. You want to add whipped cream tomorrow? You just create a tiny whipped cream decorator. You don't have to go back and mess with any of your existing working code. Now, it's pretty easy to get some of these structural patterns mixed up, so this is an important distinction to make. The decorator is all about adding responsibilities dynamically. Don't confuse it with, say, the adapter pattern, which is about making two incompatible things work together, or the proxy, which is about controlling access to an object. Each of these tools has a very specific job, and the decorator's job is adding features on the fly. So here's your cheat sheet for when to use it. Pull out the decorator pattern when you need to add behaviors to objects dynamically at runtime. Use it when you look at a problem and you can just see that inheritance is going to lead to a ridiculous number of subclasses. And finally, use it when you're trying to follow the open-close principle, the idea that your code should be open for extension but closed for modification. And there you have it, the decorator pattern. It's a really fantastic tool for building systems that are more flexible, more maintainable, and just more fun to work with. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. As you look at your own projects, what pieces of your code are just sitting there waiting to be decorated with all sorts of new possibilities? Thanks for watching.